Hello, welcome to Stories About Speaking. My name is Joanne. Last time I was here, I wanted to talk about more positive stories or nice things that have happened. And I don't know if you remember, but what I started saying to you that I hadn't really had much encouragement along the way. And as soon as the words came out of my mouth, I thought, well, that's not true. I have actually been encouraged. And that made me think of something that I think is relevant for your speaking if you're wanting to get better at speaking. Last year, my friend's dad died, and her mom had died a little bit before. But something happened when her dad died that it started me thinking a lot about our childhood because I'd been friends with this girl since I was about 8 years old. And her mum and dad have always had the same house. So even now in my 50s, I knew the phone number off by heart. And I'd been on holiday with them. By the way, there's nothing horrible about the dad, just in case you're wondering if this story is going to go dark. This is a perfectly nice, simple story. What happened was I started thinking about childhood. And I thought, oh, I think I'll check on that. I can't remember whether that was actually true or not, or how did that happen, or did that person invite me, or did I invite myself, or So I was just generally pausing and thinking about childhood, much more so when her dad died than I had when her mom died. I think when her mom died, she'd been ill for a little while. Um, so, as I say, I don't know why, it just felt completely different. It felt like the end of an era when her dad died. I knew that they were getting rid of the house. Um, my friend lives in Holland, so not so much of a reason for her to come back to the UK and visit. So, really, end of an era. And I was thinking about childhood stuff and stories. And one of the things I thought was strange was there was a lot of stories that I hadn't thought of for years, like decades. Yet there are stories that I say to people fairly regularly, like, "Oh, I'm shy, and this happened at school," or um, "This problem happened at work," and different things like that. So I was remembering all these stories, particularly about being younger and a child. Then I started thinking about young adult life and remembering other stories and different things, again, that I don't normally share. And it got me thinking about I have this pattern of these go-to stories that I talk about, especially when it comes to work or why I teach speaking and talk about it and obsessed with it. I have these kind of go-to stories that I have, which are, oh, there was this problem here, and then that I found hard, and then this was difficult, and then, oh, there was a turning point, and this happened. But I've missed out so much in that. And I started thinking, well, I'd already been thinking fascination with storytelling and I'd like to get better at storytelling. And I thought, you know what? I think I need to remember and tell some of the stories from when I was a child and young adult that are completely different to the stories that I'd told before. And this idea of talking about different stories, which is kind of leading me to people who've been positive in my life. Those stories, I haven't really said much, but obviously there's been a lot of different things that have gone on in my life. And just the other night, I've been reading a book by Marissa. Is it Marissa or Melissa? Marissa Peer. And it's like, Tell Yourself a Better Lie. And she talks about hypnotherapy and about how you talk to yourself. And what she was saying is that the stories that we tell ourselves and the stories that we repeat about ourselves from when we were younger are already edited and selected. And in a way, they're edited and selected so much that they're probably a lie. And her point is, why don't you tell yourself a better lie? If you're going to edit and select, why don't you choose some better stories to tell? And again, that links into I'm not telling people normally the times that I stood up for myself and spoke out. Um, and there are those instances, even as a teenager, where I was really quite outspoken. And again, that's not the general story. And I'm kind of wondering aloud if remembering those stories and telling myself a better lie, like re-remembering the past and coming up with a different narrative, whether that's going to make me a better speaker. So I'm kind of wondering aloud. The two examples of people that who said nice things to me and were really encouraging that first jumped out to me. I don't know whether you remember that I used to live in Madrid and I went to a public speaking group to practice public speaking. I didn't believe I could get better at speaking. I thought that that was just my personality and I was shy. But I did believe if I wanted to teach, I could learn something about speaking in public and I could learn how to do it the right way. So even though I was really nervous, I went to that. And there was a lady called Debbie. Um, she's a little bit older than me, but for some reason I saw her more accomplished and more ahead of me in terms of life path. Um, and somebody that I would turn to for advice or something like that. And she was the president of one of the clubs in another part of Spain. And there was a competition in Madrid, and I wasn't about to take part. And at the time, I was really broke and didn't have any money. And she said that she would pay my entrance fee. She goes, you really need to get up and take part in the competition, and I believe you need to have a go, and I'll pay for you to do it. And I think she paid. I think we were supposed to stay for lunch, and I didn't have enough money to pay for the lunch, and she paid for the lunch, and I think that was probably the first time in terms of speaking that somebody had really said, I believe in you. I think you can do this. Um, and I will pay to make sure that you're included. And it really, really made a difference. And I did that competition and I ended up pushing the club to organize more competitions and more events. And then I ended up being involved with um, the leadership team. It's all voluntary, but becoming a vice president of education, vice president of communication, then the president of the Toastmasters Club. If you're curious about Toastmasters, it's a non-profit organisation. Go to toastmasters.org and they're all over the world. So you'll find them English speaking and other languages as well. But anyway, Debbie was my first person who was saying, yes, have a go. And also, she was telling me stories about how nervous that she was. And to look on the outside, I would never have thought that about her. I thought that she was very confident. So that was an interesting insight too, that to start realizing that people that I think are very confident may not be underneath. But it didn't that part of things didn't really sink in till much later, and I'll probably talk about that another time. The second person that I'm remembering from Madrid, I was asked to do a talk for a networking group, and it was only a small group of women, probably about 20 women. And I was so nervous. It was the first time I'd ever done a talk, and I was over rehearsed and over practiced, and it wasn't comfortable. Um, but I was so thrilled to actually do the talk, and I did the talk, and we went through like a workshop exercise about coaching skills and different things like that. Then afterwards, she was introducing me to people, and she introduced me to this one lady, and she said, "This is the one I was telling you about. This is the one to watch." And in a nice way, not in a "this one's trouble." You need to keep an eye on her, but in a really nice way of she's one to watch. She's going places, and again, that was so unusual. Obviously, it's stuck in my memory that it was so unusual for somebody to say something like that. I think I think my memories of stories really are a lot of me just fitting in and being average Joe, just being ordinary and nobody saying anything special or stand out, or it's okay to stand out, or you have potential and that it might be worthwhile you speaking up and standing out. So those two people really jump out at me as to saying something positive. But what's interesting is that I noticed with when I was teaching, if I was paying somebody a compliment or giving somebody feedback, that their faces lit up too. Yet I didn't really see myself as that mentor, older, more experienced, more successful person. And I think that's where I've had a bit of a disconnect, is that I still see myself as somebody who's learning and figuring it out, even though I know I've come a long way. And the fact that I'm even on camera now means I've come a long way because I wasn't speaking so much before. Ah, stop it, Joanne. I need to stop saying that story, don't I? Because I was speaking. And I think the problem is that it was hit and miss, and the misses felt quite painful, but there were hit and misses. I need to stop saying I didn't speak. Sometimes I spoke, sometimes I didn't. This is going to be tricky. And I think that's the point of the podcast, is that I think it's really valuable to hear other people's stories and to hear not just, hey, success story and I figured it out, but also just to hear, oh, this is my experience. You may think this from the outside, but internally, this kind of thing was going on. I think that that could be really useful. And I've been rethinking again how I talk about learning speaking and getting better at speaking. And I, you'll notice if you go to the link about there's a pay hip link and there's a free not worksheet summary of what I say is the formula for speaking, which is feelings plus skills, and the bubble. And what I mean by the bubble is I always used to talk about feelings and skills, that you need to manage your emotions and then build your skills as well. And if one isn't working for you, you can do the other. But lately, I've been focusing in my own mind more about the bubble and like your own world view, and that there's a value to hearing other people's stories and realizing, oh, we're more similar than I thought. And lately, I've been listening a lot to comedians on podcasts, particularly Bert Kreischer and somebody called Neil, and I can't remember his name. I'll have to see if I can put the link below. Neil Brennan. Neil Brennan. He's just put out a compilation of 4 different comedians all talking about anxiety and how they cope with anxiety and how nervous they get. And all of those comedians were successful comedians, and you would not believe that they'd ever felt nervous in their life. So hearing them talk about anxiety and actually not just brushing over the conversation but stopping and talking about it really made me feel like, well, maybe it is normal to be feeling these feelings, um, especially if you've got some sort of creative interest in language. Oh, this is another thing. Let me just see if I can remember. I've written it down somewhere. Bert Kreischer was saying, Bert is a comedian. Yeah, he's known for interrupting people on his podcast, but I really like the way he talks about speaking. He was saying about walking into a room that when he's walking into a room, he gets really excited and he's preparing what he's going to say. And this is not about being on stage, but when he walks into a room, he loves that everybody turns around and looks at him. And he says there's 3 types of people: people who love the walking into a room, people who hate walking into a room and everybody looking at them, and people who don't know that walking into a room is a thing. And I think that's really true. I think most of the time I am a hate walking into the room person. I don't really like it when everybody stops their conversation and turns and looks at me. But I definitely feel something. I would definitely avoid doing that. And I remember when I was younger getting on a bus, I was probably 14 or 15, And I always used to make my friend get on the bus first, because then I can kind of sneak in behind her. And then if everybody on the bus would turn around to look who's getting on, they would see her first. Same with shops. I would always walk into a shop second. But I think that's true of speaking too. I think there's people who love to speak and to feel that there's more people watching, even if it's only like 2 or 3 people watching. I think there's people who hate it and actually have a physical sensation of overwhelm or anxiety. And I think there are some people that for speaking, it's not even a thing. It's a nothing. It's not good. It's not bad. I'm just speaking. It's normal. Everybody does it. Although I want to work with the people who find it difficult and hate it, I think the people who hate it have got more in common with people who love it than the people who feel nothing and don't think it's a big deal. I'm wondering whether those people are being so hard on themselves. One, because the story that they're telling themselves, but maybe because this idea of having taste, in that they can see and hear the difference when they're speaking to how they aspire to be as a speaker and how good they want to express themselves. And I wonder, because there's sometimes I hear people speaking and I cannot believe that they're comfortable and not embarrassed by the rubbish that they're saying. Um, that probably sounds really harsh, but as I say, there are some people that are so confident and so certain. It's just shocking to me. But again, forget them. If if you're feeling awkward and uncomfortable, it is possible. I'm thinking and percolating the idea. I think it's possible that the reason you're finding it hard is because you have taste for the subject. And that taste, if you can get over that initial starting point of finding it really hard, is actually going to make you a really good speaker and communicator in the future. It's this starting bit that is hard. So, anyway, I've kind of digressed and spoken about different things. It is about telling different stories. I am going to keep thinking about other stories. There's one where I was working in a shop and I was shouting at the boss with my hands on my hips and giving it all finger wagging and everything like that. So there are definitely multiple different stories, and I need to be thinking about, I need to be telling myself a better lie and remembering some of those instances where I did speak or I was happy about the way I expressed myself. Because I think by telling those stories to myself, that's going to impact the bubble and how I think of myself as a speaker, rather than keep repeating all the negative stuff. So there you go. Tell yourself a positive story. Not nonsense, just dip back into older memories where you go, I did figure that out, or I did stand up for myself, or I did do something. And I really think that hearing this story, and if you listen to these other people talking about speaking, that might influence just your worldview and your bubble and see how you feel. Remember, if you're looking for any of the free handouts, the digital sheets and worksheets and prompts and different things like that, then there's a link below. Hope to see you next time. Bye.